An article going around the internet, it's sparking quite a debate about an employee's pay that's been docked after a boss claims he spent too many hours on his phone instead of working. To get the knowledge and really nut this out, I've got one of South Australia's leading employment lawyers, John Love from Mellor Olsson Lawyers. Good morning, John.
Morning, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on air this morning.
No problems at all. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, that's okay. Now, what do you make of a boss docking someone's pay after just from using their phone? Now, they have obviously given them multiple warnings, but then to dock their pay and docked it, nearly $300 from that week. What goes here? Is that even legal?
Well, look, first, what I'd say, Matt, is let me say that on the facts as presented in the articles that I've read, I totally understand the employer's frustration if what they're saying is true. But to actually answer your question, in the circumstances described, no, I don't believe that the employer's decision to dock the employee's pay for that 5 hours that he allegedly spent on his mobile phone would be lawful. On the facts presented in the media, would appear to be in breach of the Fair Work Act, the modern award that probably applies to the worker's employment and possibly his employment contract as well. And deductions from employees' wages, or to use the term that gets used, docking, are strictly regulated by law and only allowed in very, very limited circumstances, which I won't go into for the purpose of today. Employers should really be aware that unlawful deductions can leave them exposed legally to civil prosecution for the amount of the deduction, interest payments, and significant financial penalties if they have actually breached the Act by the deduction.
Wow, so there's there's quite a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's not doesn't sound like it's so clear cut, but yeah, I can understand as well the frustrations of the employer. Obviously, employed this young guy for in the hospitality work in the front bar, and then obviously to find him on the phone, it could be frustrating. But so it sounds like you have to be very careful when it comes to these kind of practices. What would be the proper practice for tackling this kind of or similar kind of issues in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the first thing I'd say is not to dock an employee's wages. Would be the first rule that I'd say. But look, to be serious for a moment, and again, dealing with these sort of facts as they've been presented in the media, the way to address something like this would be warnings, disciplinary action, and if it continues, possibly dismissal. And that would be a more appropriate way of dealing with this employee's poor behaviour. Generally speaking, if an employer wants to regulate their employees' mobile phone use at work, and look, some employers have a more relaxed attitude depending on the nature of the work, and some don't. But if an employer wants to regulate that, they should be upfront during the recruitment process with the employee. They should clearly explain what the expectations are when they're at work, and perhaps even commit those in writing in the employment contract or in a written policy, like a mobile phone policy or a social media policy, so that everyone knows what the rules are, that the employee understands what the possible sanctions will be if they don't comply with those rules. So I think, high level, what I say is that, the employer should be clear, upfront and direct, and then they're in the best position to manage these issues if they come up.
Absolutely. So I think the big take home is communication is key. Setting those benchmarks of what's expected if you're to be an employee, of or whatever business it is. No,
I 100% agree with that. The difference with an employment contract compared to a lot of other contracts is that it's not a one-off transaction. It's normally a personal relationship between the employer and the employee, and it's ongoing. So communication and how the parties get along is absolutely critical to the success of the employment relationship.
Now, what would be the rights and responsibilities like for employers, and what kind of safeguards are in place, obviously for the employer, but then also the employee as well?
Yeah, that's a very, very broad question, but focusing on the facts of this sort of media article, the employer, starting with the employer's responsibilities, really are to be upfront during recruitment, and this is in my view about the expectations around things like mobile phone use at work, setting those rules, about those expectations, again, ideally in writing, either in the contract or in a policy. If there is any non-compliance by the employee, not to ignore it or acquiesce in the behaviour, and maybe perhaps start off with, polite and friendly verbal reminders about what the rules are. If the behaviour continues, then the employer might need to escalate it to something more formal, which might involve warnings, verbal warnings or written warnings that really put the employee on notice that, look, I've spoken to you about this numerous times, and this behaviour needs to stop, otherwise it might jeopardise your employment, and be clear that that if it doesn't stop, then there'll be possibly dismissal at the end of it. And look, what I say to employers is, if they are considering dismissing an employee for this kind of misconduct, it's always important that they have a fair process in place, and that the reason that they end up dismissing an employee is a valid reason from a legal point of view. And again, that if employers do get to that point, it's always sensible to seek some advice before they actually dismiss an employee, and given all the risks involved.
Yes.
If they get it wrong. From the employee's perspective, their obligation really is to comply with lawful and reasonable directions of their employer.
Mm-hmm.
And so the directions from the employer have to be lawful, as in you can't be asked to do something that's against the law.
Yes.
And it has to also be reasonable, so you can't be asked to do something that's totally unreasonable. So employees can, in certain circumstances, object or push back to doing certain things, but it really depends on what they're being asked to do. But again, coming back to your point, if the parties, particularly the employer, has been really clear in setting the expectations and having open lines of communication, then you're much less likely to have disputes over these sorts of issues.
Perfect. Now, I was thinking, if you do feel like you're being unfairly treated as an employee or even an employer, what steps, can you take, especially, if you don't have like a dedicated kind of HR department or team of people to look after that? Yeah,
look, starting the best thing, if the situation has got to the point where either party is feeling like they can't discuss it any further with either the employer or the employee, because I think what I'd always say in the first instance is to raise the issue with your employer if you're the employee, and vice versa if you're the employer in the first instance. But if that doesn't resolve the issues, then I would recommend seeking advice. And so for employers, that might be from a HR consultant, it might be from their industry organisation. So, for example, they might be a member of Business SA, or they might be a member of a retail organisation or a hospitality organisation. They normally provide a level of service, or, depending on the circumstances, even an employment lawyer that specialises in assisting employers. For employees, they could seek the assistance if they're a member of their union. They obviously specialise in assisting employees in that respect, or an organisation that assists employees, like, for example, the Working Women's Centre, or even employees can make a complaint to the Fair Work Ombudsman if they think they've been poorly treated. And again, in more extreme cases, an employee could seek the assistance of an employment lawyer that specialises in helping workers.
Perfect. John, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, nutting this out.
No problems at all.
Really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Matt. I enjoyed the experience.
Lovely. Have a great day.